And I'm curious to know, just as a person, what is like the biggest social injustice that you're concerned about, or one of them at least, and how do you think we can try to address that?
Yes, this is an easy one to answer.
It's
I think financial inequality, and I think the way that we address it is unions.
Okay, I love that. Simple. And yes, join a union. If you're not already part of a union, support a union. So you think there's a one truth of what beauty is?
Oh no, I don't think so at all.
Okay,
but
okay.
I think we're conditioned to believe that there is.
Interesting. By who? Who's doing that conditioning about what beauty is? Because it's really fascinating, right? Because beauty not only is an aesthetic thing, but beauty is something which defines what is good, and therefore what we should strive for.
Right.
And therefore is something which, impacts the way we hold ourselves in the world, and the decisions we make in order to reach this ideal. For you, I mean, I'd love to hear a bit more about that and what you think of image.
So why do we think that there's this one version of beauty? Because it sells. I mean, why anything? Because someone made a lot of money on it. The fact that you are listening to this podcast and you are involved with the school already means that you are going to make a change in your life, and it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, Kat, really glad to have you on the School of Social Justice video podcast. Welcome.
So
we're here in a beautiful setting in Bermuda to have a conversation about yourself, all the work you've done, the impact you've had, and kind of some of your opinions and ideas about the world and how we can improve it. So first off, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to hear a bit about yourself and what your mission is.
Thank you for having me. So a bit about myself, hard to summarize. When I graduated university, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't even particularly want to study the thing I studied, which was business.
Okay.
My parents insisted that if I got into business school, I should go into business school, hence business school. And I was constantly trying to find a way out, didn't go to any classes, found a passion in fashion photography, which kind of stemmed from, I did a little tiny bit of modeling when I was younger, but I loved the whole world of it. So I kind of followed that, did fashion photography for a while, mostly on the editorial side, but worked with a lot of models. I must have shot 1,000 model portfolios in my time in London.
That's a lot.
So through there, I was kind of living this double life of, I had my photography business, but I also had my day job, because as an editorial fashion photographer who's not Steven Meisel, it's tough.
Really
it's tough. So doing all of that, one day I met some people who were working on this ridiculous sounding project.
Okay.
They called it Shoott with 2 T's. A very, very young startup, couple weeks old at the time that I found out about it. And the concept was that the photo shoot is free, but you only pay for the photos that you like.
That's interesting.
And
yeah.
I, as a photographer, with no startup experience, just thought, I hate this. I've never heard anything I hate more in my life, because it was just at my point of crisis as to whether I could ever support myself as a photographer. And the thought of a free photo shoot further devaluing. What was really interesting is further along in the conversation that I, just aggravated, I continued having that debate.
Yeah.
I realized that actually it's a great economic model for photographers, because, on the client side, pretty obvious what's nice about it. You go, you do the photo shoot, and it's risk-free and it's easy to book. But from the photographer point of view, what you're getting is, so I'm a photographer and a marketing major, and I have no idea how to get clients. It's really hard. Like, the systems are pretty broken. And in the aggregate, the trends are such that photographers have to charge a lot for their time, in part because they're doing it all. They're marketing, customer service, sales, tech, et cetera, et cetera. But if you can just hire a photographer at a day rate in one location at a very, very good rate, and then lease out the time slots, so say this person comes for 30 minutes here, another for 30 minutes here, then everyone ends up winning. So it's less of an Uber for photographers model, it's more of a matchmaking service that really works out for the photographer on their own terms. So that really appealed to me. It wasn't as developed when we were having this discussion. But I mean, it was always really important that photographers get paid fairly. On average, they're paid about $150 an hour for consistent work and full day work, back to back, same location, no travel costs, no marketing costs. So was really happy about that. So we grew that from nothing for about the first year. It was struggling. It's very hard to trust a social media advertisement that says free photo shoot. No, really, seriously, it's free.
Sounds too good to be true.
Yeah. And then you Google it and it doesn't, no reviews, you know, it's very fishy. And on the other hand, photographers had the same reaction as me. So, you know, when you start running those social media ads, you just get a lot of like hatred, for lack of a better word, and I completely understood it.
Hatred in what way?
Just, you know, exploitation, right? I think photography is a very good example of workers in the gig economy, right? You're unlikely to find a salaried photographer job in portrait photography in particular, unless it's for like a Walmart photo studio. It's quite rare. So you are...
I mean, it seems like the sort of challenges that so many creatives today and throughout history have faced, whether you be a photographer or a writer, you know, these kind of roles and jobs and work which are so important to capturing what's happening now for historic reasons, but also for showing amazing artwork and amazing pieces of imagery and written work. I mean, for you, why is it so important that we need to ensure that there are proper economic models to support these kinds of roles?
Because the same reason that, you know, there's this argument of, well, if you really want to make money, you should become an engineer. But what kind of world would we have if we only had engineers? There's not that much engineering work, and after a while, it'll go the other direction. I mean, it's really difficult work, and it's commoditized and it's undervalued, and I really wish the pendulum would swing in the other direction. And so you've experienced that yourself. You're a photographer now, you know, fashion. I mean, I'm very curious about fashion though, because what is it about fashion that in terms of the world of fashion, people who buy clothes, people who go to fashion shows, people who kind of are watching what models are doing, like it's a very kind of seemingly exclusive, luxurious lifestyle and world. What brought you to that, and does the reality fit our perception as people looking from the outside? You're laughing there. No, it's not. No, I'm just like, how do I even begin to tackle this question? So what brought me into it? So as mentioned, I did a little bit of modeling when I was younger. I was scouted as a model when I was 14 because I'm very tall, and at the time I was even thinner than I am now. So pretty obvious target for a scout. My parents weren't too into the idea, and just somehow nothing particularly took flight, but you grew up in London. I love London. I grew up in the suburbs of Calgary, deep suburbs of Calgary, which is like
removed from everything.
Removed from everything. It's always cold. It's always either -30 or, you know, the weather fluctuates so much. So even if it's sunny that morning, it might become -30. Unless you have a car, you can't get anywhere. There is like some public transportation maybe, but it takes forever. So my life growing up was very much waiting for my parents to maybe drive me to my friend's house where we'd play in her garage, and then I'd drive back, and that was about it. And Calgary is lovely, but not when you can't drive, not when you're not when you're a kid, and you know. Yeah, exactly. So there's no choice but to build your inner world in your head.
Interesting. So you couldn't go anywhere. There was nowhere to go, so you had to kind of build a world which could allow you to escape in a way.
Right. So, I mean, that's my experience, and I know a lot of Calgarians are going to contradict this, and there's some beautiful parts to it, like it's so close to the mountains, but you know, my experience of growing up in Calgary was not often the mountains. It was often just my house in the suburbs. And so when I was just found basically on the street and told, you can,
that must have been so random.
It was so random, but it's like,
as well.
This kind of old Hollywood kind of, you know, the movie producer walking in the street, and he he sees the girl, and then you're gonna be a star, and then the next.
Oh, did they do that as well?
I wish. No. But it just opened this world of possibility, and I loved the imagery of it. I loved the possibility, right? Like for the most part, no one was trying to emulate this world that I felt was very connected to New York and Europe and cosmopolitan places. So I would just hang out by the agency and just be annoying, and I always liked art. So they're like, well, why don't you take these Polaroids or whatever, you know what? And I realized I was really good at it. Not so much in the sense of I want to get the lighting right, or I want to get whatever technical thing, or even a conceptual thing, but I was always very good with faces and with bodies and with movement and with understanding angles, which is what you kind of need for that particular brand.
And just with that, because with the expertise and the knowledge and the skills you need to represent certain things on screen or on a photograph, I mean, what do you think about what that means about the world we perceive? So, of course, everyone knows about the impact of social media and the consumption we have of videos, of edited photography. I mean, is there a responsibility from photographers to really kind of represent what's real or a fantasy? And I mean, what do you think a photographer's role is in the world of kind of social justice in a way?
That viewpoint for me took a long time to emerge, and I think initially it was just about conformity. I saw these beautiful images and I wanted to replicate these beautiful images, and I wanted to it's a beauty that we are conditioned to believe is the one truth, since we're very young. So
why do you think that is? That's so fascinating. So you think there's a one truth of what beauty is?
Oh no, I don't think so at all. I think we're conditioned to believe that there is.
Interesting. By who? Who's doing that conditioning about what beauty is? Because it's really fascinating, right? Because beauty not only is an aesthetic thing, but beauty is something which is find what is good, and therefore what we should strive for.
Right.
And therefore is something which, impacts the way we hold ourselves in the world, and the decisions we make in order to reach this ideal. For you, I mean, I'd love to hear a bit more about that and what you think of image.
So why do we think that there's this one version of beauty? Because it sells. I mean, why anything? Because someone made a lot of money on it. I never got into Mad Men, but we were watching it with my boyfriend just before I came here, and it really rings true. Why is it that for the vast majority of history, the trend was for women to be larger and have thinner lips, and it's trends come in and out of style. I guess that's not making the point as well, but something like women shaving legs or wearing makeup, and I shoot a lot of women, mostly female models, so this is mostly what I'm focusing on. But for men, it's the same thing. It's because then you can sell more razors and more lip gloss.
Wow. So the market, in a capitalist society, will of course go with what sells, but this form of beauty is what. I mean, do you think that's changing now with a lot of the things that have happened around protest, which have kind of challenged this stuff, and therefore we see different types of models and different kinds of folk being represented to sell products? I guess the question is, can our perception of beauty be adapted and shifted?
What's also really attractive, so there are two parts. So the first is the capitalist influence, and the other is scarcity. What's attractive to us is scarcity. So I guess analogously, it used to be that lobsters, something 200 years ago, were considered trash. And there were prisoners who were being fed lobsters who made an uprising because they said, we're still human, we shouldn't eat these lobsters, right? But everything is so incredibly subjective. So in some of these changing trends over time, you'll see it used to be more attractive that you were pale and plump, because what that meant is you're not working the fields all day, versus now, now that food is widely available, but it's often calorically not great, nutritionally not great. It's someone who can afford to work out and keep a trim physique and all of these sorts of things. So I think that definitely has to do with it as well.
Why do we need to be aware of how beauty is portrayed? You know, what are your thoughts on that, particularly because it shapes so much of what society and individuals think is good and bad?
Absolutely. Just to quickly go back to your last question, because it was a great question. So is there a change now? Because there's, I know for modeling in particular, there is a shift, and the shift is away from a scarcity in terms of just what you look like towards a scarcity in being a celebrity. Nowadays, what matters more than your portfolio is your social media following.
Okay.
So
it's not how you look specifically and distinctively, it's just how many followers you have.
Exactly.
Excellent.
And you know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Questionable, right? Because on one hand, it's a great thing, because if you have enough followers, you can really disrupt things, and it's not necessarily about pushing to physical extremes of people who are born in ways that are just so far on the bell curve. But on the other hand, it creates this necessity of, well, I need to gather all of these people to follow me, and what are the tricks that you can do to get there? You know, you have to be rich, you have to be a certain way, and that's not a good pressure either.
But what do you mean by tricks though? So in order for you to build a following, there are certain criteria you need to be a celebrity, is that what you're saying?
I think there are easier and harder ways to get likes, right? So if you take a picture of, say, your pizza pocket, your mama will like it. But if you take a picture of a lobster, you know, in a 5-star resort, and you've got your little hand with your little expensive bracelet, and you know, you're going to get 100 likes. So,
but why is that though? Because, you know, it's best for us to remember that every individual is smart. Everyone has the capacity for reason and rational thinking. We know that these images are sort of edited, and yet oftentimes in my personal I don't have a huge following by any means, but when I'll post something of me, or of something which is, as you say, something of luxury, they get more likes. But if it's something real, it doesn't. Should we really care about that? You know, posting for the likes?
We shouldn't, but we are biologically programmed to do so, right? It's,
wow, okay.
You know, like if you read, you know, literature back to the earliest times, it's the same themes of status and of even if you don't want status, you don't want to be the very best, you do want to be approved of, you want to fit in, you want to be liked, and this is just a toxic numeric reflection of society's approval of you.
I think it is quite a, you know, I've changed my sort of engagement with social media personally recently, where I haven't posted sort of for a year on Instagram, and I used to post so frequently, and I found so much peace. I don't even
have one.
That's great. I mean, that's great. I mean, that's the thing, and it is luckily a choice that we can make. Some people don't feel like it's a choice. Some people feel, you know, if you're not posting, you're not alive. It didn't happen.
If all your friends are there, you're going to be there. There's no real choice to it. And if, especially in adolescence, where these things really matter. I remember I was weird in high school. I was never I was never unpopular or bullied, but I was weird, and that was really hard on me, you know. And nowadays it's okay, whatever. But
I remember being a teenager, and sort of we'd go to like the photo booths, and we'd take photos, like passport photos, but we'd go and we'd actually give the photographs which looked best to the people, like the girl that we fancied, or, you know, it was almost like that, right? It was like now sending selfies to someone, and it's I think teenagers, particularly on TikTok now, that's a whole new world. But of course you do so much more, well, not more, but aside from your photography and fashion world,
right?
What else are you up to these days?
So I was mentioning Shoott, so that has scaled, and it's running all over the US. At some point I thought, you know, it's doing pretty well, and I wanted to move on to other opportunities. So I'm doing two things at the moment. One is I'm consulting for various companies on their product strategy. What
does that mean for people who, you know, and the school who are kind of wanting to figure out what kind of role they can play in addressing social injustices? Or, you know, what does that mean?
Sure. So product is something that I didn't know was a thing when I was in university, or else I would have majored in it and I would have gone into it from day one.
Okay.
And it's basically establishing, I mean, it goes as far as establishing what is the thing that we're building, what is the business and what is the service from the high levels, so the more strategic, down to the nitty gritty. Where do I put this button? And it kind of blends into everything else, but it is the intersection of marketing and tech and all the other functions, operations, into a distilled, what is it that we're doing here?
Okay.
So that can be manifest in all sorts of different ways. I do consumer products, consumer technology products mostly is my specialty.
What's your most exciting project there?
My most exciting, well, I can tell you the one I'm working on now. I'm working with a venture studio and fund that's remote, but there's a good amount of the team that's based in Montreal, where I am, and we're working on a Pokemon app.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, Pokemon app, that's like the coolest thing you could do in gaming, right?
Yep. And it's specifically for Pokemon, the trading card game, and other nerdcore collectibles. So, you know,
so
helping
I've got like
to
folders of Pokemon cards. That make me a nerd as well, clearly. Like,
well, everything is nerdy nowadays. It's just it's become so mainstream, right? What even is nerdcore? You know, that was one of my questions. Does that include Marvel? Does that include
That's true. The biggest franchises now, biggest IPs are that's an interesting point. The world has gone geeky. But so this is the thing you're working on, Pokemon.
So
card app.
This is something I'm working on from a consulting standpoint, which is really cool. Just talking to people in the space, and you know, what product often comes down to is talking to people and asking, do you like it? Do you not like it? Why? You know, what motivates you, and trying to distill that into insights that you can turn into some experience that they'll enjoy. And
I mean, just in terms of social injustice, some folk talk about how people who are addicted to games sometimes might be from very kind of low, sort of working class, low pay backgrounds. You know, there's accusations of addiction to games, which I find quite kind of wrong, because I feel like games like Pokemon are so universal. I mean, what do you think is the link between sort of games and social injustice? Is it, in a way, can games make the world fairer?
Games are a way to connect people. So I think it can go either way. Absolutely, there is such a thing as video game addiction, and different ways to gamify that are more likely to cause addiction without any real advantage given to the player. So if you have some kind of a feedback loop that demands that you check every day, and some kind of like a lottery system, or that you're constantly context switching, which is very difficult for the brain, right? We're kind of designed to go deep into a task, and then there's a huge flight of dopamine when we're like, oh, okay, there's this notification, there's this thing. And you know, in a casino, when you think of the bright lights and flashing colors, you know, that's a particular, it's playing on a particular kind of psychology, which is really not healthy for people, and it's damaging. But at the same time, you know, we come together over games, and they're incredibly, you know, again, since the dawn of time, it's what brings us together.
I feel like games are one of those things that no matter where you're from, you can play it and get involved with someone from, you know, totally different background from around the world. I mean, for you, like, what do you feel, based on the fact that, you know, we've had conversations since we've been here about a whole range of topics, and I'm curious to know, just as a person, what is like the biggest social injustice that you're concerned about, or one of them at least, and how do you think we can try to address that?
Yes, this is an easy one to answer. I think
like,
financial inequality, and I think the way that we address it is unions.
Okay, I love that. Simple. And yes, join a union. If you're not already part of a union, support a union. I mean, why finance? I mean, that's really interesting that that's your answer, given that you've not worked in finance or whatever.
No, I have very, very briefly early on in my career, but it's...
So financial inequality, you're saying?
Yes, exactly. So I have achieved some stuff in my life. Like, you know, I feel like I am at least somewhat above average in income and in a lot of ways, and I feel insecure. And that's kind of, that's the base of it, right? Like I worry about retirement. And if I worry about retirement, that means absolutely everyone worries about retirement. And it's very pronounced in the United States. And I think there's an overall culture of victim blaming, you know, of like, you know, well, why do Americans live paycheck to paycheck? It must be because they're all so consumerist. And it's not true. It's because they're being paid virtually nothing compared to the labor that they produce. And this really worries me. Just the fact of billionaires really concerns me. Soon to be trillionaires.
Well, what's wrong with billionaires and trillionaires? Because this is a huge debate right now, right? I think it was Bernie Sanders' campaign which kind of brought this to light, and conversations on one hand saying, you know, Bezos and Musk trying to leave Earth and build kind of you know, human villages, you know, in outer space and interplanetary. But then others saying, well, I mean, this is amazing. This is the next frontier of humanity's kind of future and history. So, of those two sides, I mean, what do you think about this? Like, on the one hand, wealth can lead to so much good when distributed through taxes or through charity, but others say billionaires and trillionaires shouldn't exist because it's an example of greed. Why do you need so much? What do you think?
Yeah, well, why do you need so much, right? That I'm very much on that angle. I think, you know, we were talking about like artists and the argument of artist versus engineer, and I think it's not real. I think we can go to the moon and we can eliminate poverty, and we could do it tomorrow if Elon Musk decided that he could still be the wealthiest guy ever. You know, he could still have more money than he'd ever spend in his life, but if he shared even parts of that, because it's compounding, right? He doesn't earn it, he doesn't deserve it.
Well,
right?
no,
Like,
but so, I mean, there is the argument, of course, that had he not taken a risk, had he not kind of once moving on from PayPal said, I want to continue and do more, you know, would there be this hype around electronic vehicles? Would there be a hype around kind of all the kinds of things that he's working on in terms of connections to the brain? I mean, not necessarily about Musk, but just in terms of this idea that we need very wealthy people, that 1% who can then define things, or of course, actually, why don't we just pay the government more, and as a government who maybe be a democratically elected government, they can make the decisions as a sort of group rather than as individuals.
Right. So the U.S. government is obviously very bloated and corrupted, and the amount that's spent on the military to the detriment of its people is concerning. Should he be rewarded for that risk? I mean, should he be rewarded for exploiting a broken system? I don't know. You tell me. But
I mean, it's interesting though, because we are, for context, in the most expensive country in the world right now, where we're shooting. We're surrounded by really successful entrepreneurs, including yourself. And actually, you've been very reflective, I think, people who are here, about kind of our role in the world, kind of impact that we're having as individuals and collectively. And so there's been quite a lot of deep kind of conversation. I mean, what do you think, as for yourself personally, what kind of impact do you want to have in the next kind of decade of your life, you know, or in the decades to come? You know, what is the legacy, given all the work you've done, that you want to leave?
Yeah, and that's something I think about. So on top of the consulting work, I'm trying to launch a business. I don't know if it's a business yet. We're still validating the concept. Just in beta right now with about 1,000 people, so fairly small stakes. But it's an app for professional resellers to sell to each other. For now, and we have some plans for where that could go. But the thought is.
And what does that look like in practice for people who don't know the industry?
Yes, good point. What that looks like is you'll have professional resellers who are...
What's a reseller?
A reseller is someone who sells things online through public channels. So it's someone who makes their living off of selling on, say, eBay or Poshmark or something like that. So they'll go to, say, garage sales or thrift shops. They'll find the arbitrage and they'll sell to the end consumer, which is a valuable service, actually. You know, there's, I guess, a bit of a stigma around people who, what's the term? Forgetting the term. People who grab things very low.
And, they do it with PS5s and Pokemon cards.
Right. Yes, with Pokemon cards.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but we'll put it on a little caption there.
Great.
Put it in the edit.
Yeah, but for the most part, it's they're finding inventory that otherwise wouldn't be reachable, and they're putting it onto the market in a way that's searchable, with customer service and with shipping well taken care of. And so they're making secondhand goods available commercially with the same ease as just buying something retail. So that's
so why is that important? So is that important because we're talking about things which are not being used then can be used? We're talking about kind of, you know, people maybe who might have been unemployed but now have a means through which to earn a living. Small to medium enterprises and business. I mean, why should the ordinary person care about this stuff?
If you can buy secondhand, do. First of all, it's a cost savings, so that's great. And oftentimes the stuff isn't exactly the same condition as you would get it from the big box stores. The reason that it's so expensive at the big box stores is because they have to pay for the marketing. That's really it. And then you're paying for the item without the marketing. You're also very oftentimes, there's no conglomerate of resellers as far as I know, but it's a bunch of independent local sellers in your area who make their living this way. So you're supporting a local business person who's just striking it out on their own.
Why do you think there are certain folk who kind of demonize business people, you know, often forgetting the fact that so much of our economy, so much of our society is built on the work and business of small kind of businesses which are run by families for decades, run for maybe by a couple of folk who might have just run a corner shop for a while. You know, we're talking about resellers now. Why do you think there is this demonization of business folk?
I think it's warranted because I think they have power, and I think on average, which may be a mean and not a median, but on average they are exploitative.
Okay, exploitative in what way?
Exploitative in the sense that, and that goes back to the previous argument that if you're my employer and you get a contract for the company and I do all of the work and you just kind of manage, but you get a much higher salary and you take the additional, the sort of profits, the surplus of our labor and take it for yourself, I can't do anything about that. And market conditions are such that, you know, there's never been less power in the hands of the worker since capitalism really took hold. So I think there's a huge amount of responsibility on the part of business owners to ensure that they're running their businesses fairly and spreading the wealth.
I found this so fascinating, not only because of your argument, but also because of, you know, you employ people, so you have employed people through your business, and you are an employer, and yet you're making a very strong case, not yet, but you are making a very strong case for organised labour, as well as the protection of workers' rights and you know, good working conditions. And why do you think that is? And how do we, you know, you said the mean is exploitative. How do we ensure that other business owners kind of take a similar approach?
The only way I can ever think of is unions. I mean, it's collective bargaining. If you, as an individual, try to go up to Walmart and say this can't stand, I'm working 3 jobs and I still can't afford a 1-bedroom apartment, you know, this is you're not going to get anywhere. But if everyone who works at Walmart, not that this is possible for a wide variety of reasons anytime soon, but just feeling very passionately about that these days and for a while.
As an employer, what do you think employers can do? And also because
Right.
some people who might be considering sort of what career path to take, what are they going to do maybe after they graduate or later on in their career, they might be thinking, business is not a world for me. Business is not a place where I can have social impact. Business is not where you do social justice. And yet, when we think about the power of business to impact lives, not only at scale, but also in depth, given all the conversation we've just had, how can we ensure that business is a place where people who want to do good seem like, or feel at home and feel comfortable with becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship is great because then you do have that power in as much as you can retain it.
Okay.
If you want to build something good and there's some kind of a market need for that good, you're going to be very successful and people are going to love you. I think where it gets tricky is, the old saying that power corrupts. There might be a point where when you're making business and when you're doing the good things that you do, you realize that doing it one way will get you personally millions of dollars, and then the other one won't, and it's very tempting to go for the one that
Have you had a kind of decision like that you've had to make in your life?
Oh no, luckily I was never that large of stakes.
But you're right, like there are these dilemmas, whether you be a business person, non-profit leader, an employee at a small store. You have to make these big decisions of which whether or not they're selfish or selfless. And I mean, how have you made these kinds of decisions in life? Like how have you kind of decided between a tough option and another one?
It's tough. It's tough. You don't always get to decide. Sometimes it just kind of happens. You have somewhat of a say because business is very rarely run by one person. So you kind of do the best you can, and you live with the compromises that you can live with, and you go on podcasts and you talk about how we should all unionize. Realistically, you can't solve it, and that's the point. It's we as a society have to just make little pushes until we together can solve it. But I think
let's go into that a bit more, because that is one of those things. I mean, the school was set up to help teach people how to change the world. Obviously a small ambition, but the whole purpose is to give people inspiration, but also the know-how and knowledge through having conversation and learning from people who have already done great things. Why do you believe that it's incremental steps rather than big steps is what we need to focus on?
Because it's very rare. I mean, I can't think of any time when a change was immediate, right? Change takes time, and if you think about how your views changed over time on something that you might not have believed 10 years ago, but you believe now. First there was a small exposure and you laughed at it, and and then eventually you come around to it, and now you can't possibly think otherwise. So it just, that's the way it has to be.
Yeah. That's really helpful. We're nearly closing off, but I've got a couple last questions. How do you learn, Kat? Like, you've obviously become very successful. For you to get there, there's been a lot of learning, whether it be formal education, informal education. How do you keep progressing? How do you keep on top of things? Do you have any advice for people who want to learn about how to make a difference?
Yes. Yes, I do. So put yourself in uncomfortable situations, which is not very specific advice. So I'm going to make that hopefully more specific and therefore more helpful. If there's an opportunity that presents itself somehow where you think you're underqualified, immediately take it. Unless it somehow conflicts with your morals, just go for it and fake it till you make it, and you're going to fail initially, but you're going to learn so much faster than if you don't. If you have a dream or an ambition, just try it, and you're probably going to fail, but you're going to learn so much, and then the next one is going to be that much better. I suppose, take risks. And I say this as someone who's always had a bit of a safety net, so I don't know how much this is applicable, but like as much as you can, and I guess be smart about it, but do take those risks.
I feel like that's something that any entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur needs to be comfortable with, taking risks. And and as you say, if you were to fail, and if you tried and you've learned something, if you don't try, you will never know, and you know you could have achieved something amazing. So that's really great advice.
Yeah, I think like just on the back of that, it's not you try and then you fail and then the story ends. That's often where the story begins. Like you have to fail, but every time you fail a little bit less.
Yeah. Hopefully. Do you have an example that you would like to share as well about, like?
Oh my God,
you know,
yeah.
a real world example.
Like I'm trying to start this reselling business. I mean, this is like our third pivot. You know, we're trying things, and we know there's something, and with every iteration we get closer to it. But just because some business has worked out in the past doesn't mean the next one will. Far from it. It means I'm a little faster at identifying certain things, but every time it's just it's never like you get success and then it's success forever. It's just you might get to a level and you settle. If you want to do interesting things, you're always going to feel like a fraud.
Yeah, that's deep. Okay, we're running out of time. I'm trying to think of one last question to ask you. I don't know whether or not to go personal or more like kind of big picture. Maybe I'll just go with big picture for now. So we talked a lot about the importance of entrepreneurs and business people, and the importance of sort of employees and people without much power to organise. For the individual who's trying to figure out what role they want to play in this world of social change, what advice would you give them in terms of how they should choose what to dedicate their life to?
Life is not linear, and please don't feel any pressure to choose. And please don't feel any pressure whatsoever, because life is luck, and life is it's also a lot about what opportunities you take and how you deal with the luck presented to you, but it's so much about luck. The fact that you are listening to this podcast and you are involved with the school already means that you are going to make a change in your life, and it's going to be amazing. And that's it. Just keep being you and keep thinking of that way. And when the right opportunity presents itself, you'll know, and go for it.
Wow, that is so beautiful, poetic. Whilst the wind was blowing and the birds are chirping in the background and the skies are blue and the sun is setting. Thank you so much, Kat, for your time. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure the students will too. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you so much to all of you who have become monthly supporters of the School of Social Justice. Your monthly contributions make a huge difference and allow us to deliver content which is educational and teaches people how to make a difference. If you want to become a patron as well, it's really simple. All you've got to do is go to the schoolofsocialjustice.com website, then click supporters, and choose how much you want to contribute, whether it be £20 a month, a £5 a month, or a £10 a month. Let's go with a £10 a month. It's really simple. Put in your details, put in your card number, click pay now, and you become a supporter. Whilst £5 a month is not much individually, it makes a huge difference collectively. And if we get 2,000 patrons, we can independently deliver content to you every single week to help ensure that we fulfill this mission of training the next generation of Martin Luther Kings. Thank you so much to all of you who've become patrons so far. You've made a huge difference and allowed us to continue with our work. And if you do become a patron, thank you so much. Your support means a lot. Take care. Bye.